Hello, and thank you, Julie, for that introduction. I'm Kate Fenner, and I'm an equine scientist and a horse trainer by trade. And so tonight we're talking about getting your horse back from the breaker. Now, the breaker is an old-fashioned word. I know we usually talk about an educator now, or having your horse started under saddle. I just say back from the breaker because I like the alliteration. And so I want to discuss that. I actually think that we're much better off training our own horses, and I came to that conclusion after a long time spending taking horses in for training, and particularly in for backing and problem horses. So starting in backing was my main business for more than a decade, and then I realised that was great, and it was a lot of fun for me because I love doing it. It's a great job. But I would send the horse back to the owner, and it would really be quite difficult for the owner after some time. So it was great for the first little while, but then the horse will regress to the owner's level. So the owner will get a bit better, and the horse will come down. They'll meet at the same level because the horse really, it's not the horse's responsibility to teach the owner. It's the owner's responsibility always to train the horse. So I just came to the conclusion that we're better off teaching the owners to train the horse than we are training the horse and then giving it back to the owners and expecting the horse to do it, more or less. Anyway, we don't all want to do that. So what I want to talk about first is if you are sending your horse out to a trainer, to how to choose that trainer, because we all know there are good trainers and there are bad trainers, and how do we choose the good one? And I think one of the really important things is to look at that trainer ride, or what if you're not sending your horse out to be actually backed, if you're just sending it out to be handled, just to watch how that trainer interacts with horses. But I particularly like to look at how they ride, and if I see a trainer, that I really like the way they ride, then that would be a really positive thing for me. That would really help me decide. I also would like to know what method they use, and people, have a lot of people, sort of have their own method, but most people follow a particular way of doing things. So I'd look into that. I think it's very important to look at what equipment they use, because, with our very precious baby horses, we really don't want them using harsh bits or ill-fitting saddles. Now, this is the biggest thing I see, the biggest problem I see is ill-fitting saddles. And as we all know, sort of private horse owners, we have our saddles properly fitted to our horses sort of on a regular basis. But then you have to be a little bit careful when you send a horse out, because it's unlikely that that horse is going to be fitted to a saddle. And I had somebody ring me up just yesterday who was actually starting her own horse, and she got on it for the second time and it went nuts, and she couldn't work out why. And I said, well, what saddle are you using? And she said, oh, I'm using my old stock saddle because, I didn't want to ruin my dressage saddle. And I said, well, does it fit the horse? And she said, well, it might be a bit small, but I've put quite a thick pad on it. And I thought, oh, okay, well, let's have a think about that, because if it's already tight and then you put a thick pad on, it actually makes the saddle tighter. So what I think has happened is that, she's sat on the horse and it's with her, and so the horse is bucked. And then that's something that does happen a lot. The next thing is, what promises is the trainer making? And you hear quite frequently, oh, I'm going to ride it for an hour a day. Now, if you've got an unstarted youngster that's gone from standing in the paddock for the first 3 or 4 years of its life to going into training, and somebody is going to tell you that, after the first week or 2 weeks that they'll be on it for an hour a day, then you're going to have to assume that that horse is going to suffer in some way, because they simply don't have the muscles or they haven't built the top line up to be able to deal with that. And the next thing is time. How much time are you going to allow the horse to be at the trainers, and how much time is the trainer going to spend with that horse each day? I ideally find a young horse, an educationally young horse, no matter what age it might be, a horse that hasn't had a lot of training, I find that physically and mentally, if you can do 15 minutes with that horse twice a day, you're doing really well. And that's sort of optimal. That's what I've found to be optimal, because they can cope mentally and physically with about that much. So we're looking at it from the horse's perspective. Now, the age of the horse is important when we send it off to the trainer, because we have to make sure that it's fully developed. This horse you can see here is a 5-year-old. He looks like a baby, but you know, he's a Frisian, and physically he's quite underdeveloped. And this is his. I took a year to start this horse under saddle, and even then I didn't do much riding with him because he was quite immature, physically immature. Physical fitness-wise, if your horse has been standing in the paddock for the first 4 or 5 years of its life, it's not physically fit. And this is one of those things that I really like to build the horse's top line as I start them under saddle. So I actually teach my horses very early on to long rein. So I never lunge them, but I long rein them. And the beauty of long reining is that you have a nice round horse that's in self-carriage and is elevated in its shoulders, and it's got its hind quarter underneath it, and you build that top line, and you're educating the horse at the same time, because it's not using any tie downs, you don't have side reins, but you can see that the horse is a nice soft frame and in self-carriage. So you're building top line and you're educating at the same time without actually sitting on the horse, which is great for the horse's physical fitness. So when you do come to ride, your horse has already built that muscle, which I think is very important. The next thing is the horse's emotional level. Some horses are just more emotional than others. And I always look at emotional level as a sort of a range. You know, if you judge it out of 100, and you say your normal sort of cob in the paddock is a 50 out of 100. Like, he's not asleep and he's not excited. He's just a normal horse, 50 out of 100. If you go running into the paddock with a bucket of food, he probably goes up to a 60 or 70. This horse here, Frisians are a little more emotional generally. This horse is a 65 in the paddock. He's very vigilant. He's, always looking around. He's always very aware of his surroundings. So he's a little bit more emotional, so we have to deal with him slightly differently. There's a lot of horses that are very relaxed. We might have to push them up a little bit when we're training, just to make them a little bit more emotional, so make sure we're engaging them. With this guy, he's already quite emotional, so he's already very engaged, and you can see with his ears there, just in this picture, that's how he always was. You can also see I'm not tying him up, because I really want to know that I'm not going too far too fast for him. And just by having him standing there, if I overface him and increase his emotional level too much, he can walk off. If he canters off, I've really made a big mistake, And you can see he's standing there, his head's reasonably high, his ears are on me. He's very engaged with the lesson, but he's decided that he'll stay. And also, you as a trainer, how experienced are you? So when your horse comes back from the starter, how are you going to continue on? So what we want to look at is what the horse will know when it comes back from the trainer. So let's say you'll send your horse off for 6 weeks. So as we discussed already, we've got to think about the time that the trainer has spent with the horse. The horse in the picture here is a 3-year-old. And we often, I think, especially with these big horses, we overestimate their, we overestimate their age, their emotional level, and all sorts of things, because they're so big. So we look at them and think, oh, great big horse, it'll be fine, they're a big, strong horse. And often they're not. So we do need to think about the horse's emotional maturity. We also need to think about the trainer's ability. So, how able was the trainer to deal with that horse's emotional level or emotional maturity. And that is going to change how the trainer approach the horse. And people do get a little bit more frightened sometimes of very big horses, and they tend therefore to treat them slightly differently. I find that some trainers are a little rougher with big horses than they are with the small ones. The trainer's discipline is also going to influence what the horse learns, and if they had a training plan or not. You find that sometimes they've gone in with a very good plan. It's always a good idea to ask what the plan is. We all know that you can't always stick to a plan exactly, but going in without one, I think, is a big mistake. So you ask your trainer what their training plan is. So once you get your horse home, it's a good idea to assess what the horse knows. So if you can do that with the trainer, that's great. You know, if you can ride with the trainer, watch the trainer ride, and just find out exactly what the horse knows. Then you'll also know what it doesn't know and what you need to teach it. It's most unlikely that the horse is going to come back from the starter knowing everything you want it to know. So make a plan. Make a plan of how you're going to get there. What's it lacking? Now, probably going to be lacking, let's say, for example, its canter's just a mess. You know, let's say the horse didn't cope that well with the canter work, and so the trainer, you know, only had it for 6 weeks or something, and he said, right, you know, that's what you're going to have to work on. You need a good plan to improve that canter. Now, the first thing might be, you know, to get the horse used to a good cue, maybe a good verbal cue that you could make. So you could do that. You could do that on the round pen, in the round pen. You could do it on the long rein, but have a good plan to get there. Think about your horse's physical and emotional fitness. Hopefully, the horse stays physically fit at the trainers, and you also have to think about its emotional fitness. And I would, for both of these things, go back to your 15 minutes twice a day if you possibly can, or 15 minutes twice a day on those days that you can do it. And I do think this is important. So even if the horse has had quite a big spell with the trainer, like quite an eventful time with the trainer, I think when it comes home, you want to break it down more for the horse, because now, you know, the rest of its life is starting now, and I think you want to make sure it's all very positive for the horse. You need to think about working the horse in the engagement zone. So what I mean by that is, we were talking a little bit before about the emotional level of the horse. The engagement zone is where the horse is slightly more emotional than it would be if it were just standing in the paddock, but not so emotional as it wants to leave or feels nervous or anxious. And there's a nice area in there that I call the engagement zone, which is where you want the horse to be emotionally when you're training. And it's like that wonderful teacher you had at school that you always loved those lessons because they told great stories and had a big smile on their face and they were really fun to be around. You were engaged with those lessons, and that's what you want to be. You want to be that sort of teacher for your horse. Start small. So, you know, I often think that it can be really disruptive, and some horses suffer more than others from this. But, you know, going away to a trainer can be quite an emotional ordeal for a horse. So when you get it home, just start small. Go to those 15-minute sessions, even if it means, you know, for the first little while, not even riding the horse, give the horse a break. Perhaps you could tap it up and long rein it or something like that. But do start small. And while you're doing that, you need to be building your bubble of communication. Now, by that, I talk about the bubble of communication a lot. And really that's having the horse in that engagement zone. And I like to use the word bubble because if you look at the horse here that I'm riding, if that horse gets frightened, the first thing it's going to do is going to prick its ears to look at what frightened it and put its head up. And that's going to burst my bubble. You can see there she's sort of listening to me, she's relaxed, she's round, she fits in the bubble. So as soon as her head goes up when she gets nervous, it's going to burst. And I like to use that sort of word, the bubble, and it keeps the horse in the engagement zone. So when that bubble does burst, you have a nice simple exercise like give to the bit or something like that. You can bring the horse back into the engagement zone. So what are the biggest issues that I see with horses coming back from trainers? And with starting, the biggest one I see, and really these aren't in any particular order to be honest there, but the cues. So the trainer has different cues, and we all know we all have different cues. I have different cues from you. Even if we think we've got the same cue, they're going to be different. They're going to feel different, sound different to the horse. And that, of course, can lead to a lot of confusion with the horse and frustration. Now, the way around that is to, thank the trainer and then say, right, now I'm going to really take this horse back to basics so that the horse learns my cues. The flight behavior, this can be a real problem. I wonder whether flight behavior can lead to post-traumatic stress in horses. This is a topic that has had very little research done on it, well, actually, because it's had none. But there's something about horses that are chased sometimes. It seems to me they really don't recover well from at all. And I think it's something you need to be careful of when you're choosing a trainer. Trainers that use the round pen, just make sure they're not chasing the horse or tiring the horse out before they get on or before they try and teach it something. The problem with that is that if you chase a horse around a round pen, it is exercising its flight instinct. So it's practicing its flight instinct. Horses will repeat any behavior they practice. So that's a big problem because you really don't want the horse doing that under saddle. The other thing is that the horse then learns that as a possible answer. So every time you put the horse under some pressure, that's a possible answer. Possible answer is flight. You might have just wanted a nice counter transition, but if the horse doesn't know that, that's a possible answer. Also, the horse is getting a little bit more fit every time, so you're going to have to run it around a little bit longer each time. And general anxiety, of course, if you've got a horse that has been away for a while, you really don't know what its emotional level was like when you weren't there. So the horse could be suffering from some generalized anxiety. The entire process could have been quite anxiety-ridden. And back to the new environment, of course, the horse has just gone to a new environment where it hasn't stayed very long, and that could have been quite a stressful environment. And then it comes back home. Again, you're changing its environment. So give the horse a chance to settle in. The top line problem we discussed, and I do think that long reining will help you a lot with that, because you get that inappropriate behaviour. The horse is bucking, running when they hurt, of course. So how can you sort of ensure that you're successful? And I think these 10 things will help you, whether your horse has come back from the breaker or whether you're starting your own horse or whether you're just bringing your horse back in after a break. I'd go through these 10 steps. So first of all, check their physical health, and that's saddle fitting and dentist. So really, really the most important #1 step, get that right before you go any further. Get the horse into the engagement zone. So get that emotional level right. Now, it's really tempting, especially if you've got quite an emotional or flighty horse, a bit like the Friesian we saw. It's really tempting to always try and bring that emotional level down. But we can't do that. Training is about raising and lowering the emotional level. So we can't force the horse to relax. We can offer the opportunity to relax, but we can't force it to relax. So if the horse comes to the lesson as a 70 out of 100 emotionally, and we want it to be a 65, The best thing we can do is push it up to a 72 and then offer it the opportunity to relax, because we can't force it to go from a 70 to a 68. We can just push it up and then offer it to relax. And if we push it up to 72, it might well come down to 68. Then we can push it up to 70 and it might come down to 66. And we work like that. The next thing is start small. And we should know this with everything, really. You know, if you want to take up a fitness routine yourself, you shouldn't, and we all do it, but you shouldn't try and go to the gym every day of the week for an hour, you know, because on day 3 you're going to fail. So start small. If you're getting fit yourself, the first week you might just put your trainers on. The second week you might go to the gym and have a little walk around. The third week, do some exercise. But you know, set yourself a plan. Don't start with riding for an hour a day. Start with bringing your horse in, giving it a groom and a feed, and putting it back out. Bring it in, tack it up, long rein it, put it back out. Begin on the ground. Now, you can teach pretty much everything from the ground, and I'm not convinced it makes a big difference to the horse whether you do it from the ground or on its back. I think it's very important that the horse does respond to the cues, and if the horse has already been taught to, already been habituated to the saddle, then I think you just as well to teach things from the ground. So bubble building, and that's what you're doing on the ground with your give to the bit work and all your shoulder control. You're building that bubble of communication, getting your horse into the engagement zone. I love long reining because I think it keeps you safe. I think it builds the top line of the horse as well. And I use that for everything that I'm going to ride. So I long rein, walk, trot, canter, but I also long rein trail riding. So I take the horse on the long reins on the trail. And when I've got the horse on the long reins, I go to number 7, which is, can I ride that? That's my first question. I look at the horse, walk, trot, canter, look at those transitions. Can I ride it? My next question is, do I want to ride it? And I don't get on until the answer to do I want to ride that is hell yes. If the answer is, yeah, maybe, I don't know, fingers crossed, I'm not going to get on. But if when your answer is, oh, yes, I really want to ride that, you know that you and the horse are on the same page. You know the horse is in the engagement zone. So establish a good routine for the horse. And I do that with some give to the bit and shoulder control, and then I long rein, and then I ride. So I have a short ride. And then you enlarge your work area. So it's going to be more emotional for the horse the bigger the work area. So if you have a round pen, start in the round pen. If you don't have a round pen, start in your arena. If you've got a fenced arena, at the easiest end of the arena, the end the horse is most comfortable, usually the gate. If you don't have an arena and you've only got a paddock, start in the area of the paddock that your horse is most comfortable. There's no reason to make it more difficult for your horse than it has to be. Once you've got that area and your horse is comfortable in that area, then start to move it. And that's really easy to do on the long reins especially. You can start to long rein the horse further and further away from its comfort zone. I do it with the round pen as well. So if I'm riding, I'll start riding in the round pen. The next place I ride is outside the round pen. So I ride around the outside of the round pen, and that actually gives the horse is very familiar with that environment, although he's on the other side of the fence, but it still gives the horse the fence as well, which helps support the horse. And then gradually increase your length of ride. So, I start always with a 3 to 5 minute ride, and then I just increase that. So I do less and less long reining and more riding. So that's it from me. I do have a free video series out at the moment, which is that link there below. And there's 4 videos in that series. And I talk about the engagement zone in the first one. In the second one, I talk you through how to teach your horse give to the bit, which is the lesson I use to get the horse into the engagement zone. And finally, I talked to you about the principles of training in the third video, and we talk you through teaching your horse to stop. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, Julie.